Welcome, folks. So glad you're here. My name is Seth Bush. I am the advocacy manager at Bike Pittsburgh. If you're just joining us, again, please put your name and pronouns, your neighborhood, your bike ped committee or neighborhood group if you're part of one, maybe a brief sentence about what you'd really like to get out of our time together into the chat. I am a redheaded white guy with a teal shirt. I got kind of a blurry background in the background here. Got a little bit of a beard. We like to describe ourselves at the start of these calls in case we have anybody who is either has low or no vision, or maybe you just aren't getting to look at your computer while you're listening to my dulcet tones talk about nerdy capital budgets tonight. And I invite folks to do the same. I hope that some of you have questions and thoughts to share as we go through tonight. So I hope we'll get to hear some of your voices, not just on chat. So I just ask that before you speak, if you could give a very brief image description and your name and pronouns, that would really help us. Um, and once again, if you can put your neighborhood in your name on Zoom, you can go up to the three dots on your image, click rename. That'll help me get a sense of where folks are joining us from. I already told you I'm the advocacy manager at Bike Pittsburgh. We are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit dedicated to making our streets safe, accessible, enjoyable, so that people do not need to rely on cars to get around. We love making our streets better for people biking, of course, walking, wheeling, etc. And it's my job as the advocacy manager to help this awesome network of like close to 25 neighborhood advocacy groups do advocacy effectively. So identify opportunities for change in your community and make it happen. I provide coaching, training, support, networking, things like that, and workshops like this. So glad you're here. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Eric, to say hello.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Borer. I'm the advocacy director of Bike Pittsburgh. I use he, him pronouns. A late 40s white guy with glasses and brown hair. Um, you might see an orange cat jump on my lap. He likes to do that now and again. Um, yeah, so while Seth deals with a lot of, we'll say, the grassroots folks, I deal with a lot of the grass tops folks. So I deal really closely with the city, PRT, other agencies that we're trying to pass policies in, work with to get new infrastructure in place, all that kind of stuff. So I help the organization manage those relationships. And
Awesome.
I'll
Thanks,
pass it
Eric.
back to Seth.
Yeah, appreciate it. And I think it's awesome. You know, we won't do intros. We got a lot to share, but you're doing that in the chat, and it's great to see folks from a bunch of different walks of life all over the city, from North Side to Lawrenceville, all the way to Dallas, Texas. So glad you're here, Temple. So great to have some representation. Why we're here tonight is really one of the most reliable tactics that we have found to get the change that we want for better biking and walking is to advocate for funding for infrastructure in the city's capital budget. Really, just about any tangible improvement that you can think of is going to need to get paid for somehow. Somebody's going to have to pay for it, and the city's budget is often what is paying for that infrastructure improvement in the public right of way. There are some things that have been on private property or happen through other means, but the bulk of it comes from city money. So this workshop is going to train you how to effectively engage with really the months, year-long capital budget development process so that our mayor, and we have a new one, and city council, and we have some new ones, are more likely to dedicate funding to make the change that you, their constituents, want to see. And you'll hear me say this over and over again tonight. Working through this capital budget process is not the only way to get the change that you seek. We need to be doing more than sending capital budget letters to win our campaigns, but this has proven effective year after year. And even if you're not hyper focused on one campaign, being involved in the process in some way is going to help show the city how much people care about complete streets where everybody can get around safely, accessibly, enjoyably. It's going to grow that pie for funding over time. So tonight we're going to talk about three learning objectives. One, what is the capital budget? What is this thing? And how is it developed? What's the process? Two, how can you engage with each of the steps of that process? And three, how to use that process to inform your grassroots advocacy efforts throughout the year. So, using this as kind of a foundation, a roadmap of sorts to build upon for your other tactics. So, to get there, our agenda. We have a presentation that I'm going to give about the capital budget process. It's nerdy, it's wonky. I hope you'll get a lot out of it, and I hope you'll generate some good questions. But then we're going to hear from our friend Thomas in the South Side, who's with us tonight. He's been using this process year over year with his advocacy group, Southside Smart Streets, just so we can see how this works in practice. We'll have some time for Q&A. Uh, any tips that I haven't already shared through the Q&A, I'll cover in a couple more slides, and then we'll just have some discussion, more time for questions and close. But before we jump into it, I would love to have you hop into the chat again and just share a little brainstorm. What are some specific infrastructure projects that you would like to see happen in your neighborhood or maybe the city broadly? Give a few moments for you to share some of those ideas in the chat while I am setting up the screen share here. So go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat. Yeah, Stu, you're working on this Drain Grate project. That's a lot of little things. Um, Emily, safer crossing on Coral Street, Negley bike lane, so that last mile connection for the neighbor way over there. Yep. I know there's some other good ideas in here. What do you want to see? No bad ideas. Yeah, a safe way to bike to Upper Lawrenceville, past McCandless Street, not McCandless Township, Stu. That doesn't involve going into the side street halfway up the hill. So some changes over there. Yeah, Chuck, I know you all have been working on better bike facilities in the Commons. Um, Aaron, just more funding for maintenance of bike lanes, Sharrows. We're going to talk about how that is actually probably sometimes that's capital budget, but it might actually be a little bit more in the operations side of things. So we'll kind of draw some of those distinctions, which I hope is going to be helpful. Snow clearing on bike lanes, don't we need it? I think we have discovered that over the past weeks. We'll talk about this distinction as well. If the city's buying new equipment that's going to last for a long time, that's going to be expensive, yes, check. Definitely capital budget. If it's more so operations and just getting the city better tuned to do the right thing, that's going to actually be coming out of a different budget. That's going to be coming out of different territories. So you can already see there's some distinctions, and we need to be really precise about what is it that we're asking for and in what way are we asking for it. So thanks for these good ideas. I hope you can see the presentation here. Can I get a thumbs up if folks can see the slides? Okay, great. So, how to influence the city's capital budget? Well, what is it? I'm going to read straight from the city here. The capital budget allocates public monies to projects that design, build, restore, retain, or purchase any city-owned asset that is expected to provide a long-term public benefit or propose physical improvements in an element of the city's infrastructure. Capital projects shall have a minimum value of $50,000. So anything has to be above that threshold and a minimum useful life of 5 years, like we talked about earlier, Thomas. Really, the capital budget is reflecting the priorities of our city. It's saying, here's what we are choosing to invest in as a community, not just for next year, but for coming years, right? So the capital budget reflects does our leadership really care about, and in a democracy, hopefully we're shaping what that actually looks like. A couple of projects that are examples of what's been funded through the capital budget. One is the Stanton Ave bike lanes. Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. On Stanton Ave, it happened in two phases. Both were separately funded in the capital budget over the course of years. Took a lot of advocacy from neighbors really pushing for this, making requests, and it happened. And Eric's going to tell us briefly about the next two.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Seth. Yeah, this one, the next two are slightly related. Allegheny Circle, as well as the Trail to Maridale project. Basically, the North Side Bike Ped Committee, now called Walk Ride Northside, was very active in working with their council people on making capital budget requests, just being very clear about what they wanted in terms of where they wanted bike infrastructure on their streets. So they identified Allegheny, like they identified a whole network of streets through the north side, basically creating a big loop through the north side, and submitted that to the city year after year after year, and eventually things began to chip away. Now, Allegheny Circle wasn't totally funded by the capital budget; it did get some federal funding, but the capital budget did help move the project forward. So go ahead to the next slide. Yeah, and so the Trail to Maredale project essentially connects the end of the bike trail on the north side all the way to Maredale Street into Riverview Park. And that was a major thing that they were really pushing for. And eventually, the city installed what's called a neighborway along there. So which includes a combination of speed humps, sharrows, bike lanes, depending on context. And then Bike Pittsburgh helped introduce that street mural right in front of the library a couple of years ago. But
Thanks, Eric.
yep.
Um, a couple of terms that I think will be useful just to kind of prime us with here. There's the capital budget and then there's the operating budget. So again, capital budget is long-term investments. It's projects with a useful life, exceeding, I think it's actually supposed to exceed 5 years, certainly 1 year. Financed through general funds, so that's tax dollars, but also bonds, grants, and long-term loans. So that's like the tangible stuff, right? Then there's the operating budget. And so this covers the day-to-day expenses for the whole city for ongoing services operations. We're talking salaries for staff and benefits and all of those pieces for the people power, and those recurring costs within the current fiscal year. So also utilities, paying the bills, keeping the lights on, paying for supplies. Um, Primarily, this is financed from just general funds. So, the taxes that we pay, and then fees that are charged on people. So kind of two different categories there. And then another important distinction to make is our friends at DOMI, the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, and our friends at DPW, the Department of Public Works. For a long time, the city just had a public works, and then after Bike Pittsburgh advocated for a complete streets policy and worked with then Mayor Bill Peduto, they formed DOMI to really specialize in taking a closer look at the planning and designing of transportation-related infrastructure. So they oversee projects related to sidewalks, curbs, streets, bridges, sometimes trails to some extent. They're really doing that design in the public right of way, whereas DPW is doing the operations and maintenance of a lot of things. I mean, they're taking out the trash, they're plowing the streets, they're also doing paving. So maybe DOMI designed the street and helped get it built the first time, but now DPW makes sure that it's paved and repainted properly. They do a lot of stuff overall. A good example is DOMI might plan where a curb cut should be in its specific design, while then DPW builds it and maintains it, right? What it then boils down to is DOMI manages more of the capital budgets, projects overall than DPW, and their role is more often based in, to some extent, in operations. These lines are not always clear. They're not always clean. So I'm just sharing this to give you a little bit of a sense of the differences. You do not need to be experts in this. If you ever have questions about like, wait, where should I be asking for money to go or money to come from? Please ask us. We're here to help. And the other term I wanted to share that you'll hear me talk about a lot is OMB, the acronym. That's the Office of Management and Budget. So this is really the office that manages the operations of the city. So that's where the chief of staff for the city. You might hear them referenced. Dan Gilman is our current chief of staff, is kind of housed in OMB. They are really providing leadership for the city and figuring out how we do what we do, but they're also in charge of the budget. So they're going to be spearheading that preparation, implementation of annual budgets and long-term plans. They also handle procurement, planning, management. They're the number crunchers, right? They have a whole like team within OMB that is taking in proposals from various city departments, city council, various stakeholders, and then crunching the numbers to see how can we do as much of that as effectively and strategically as possible while maintaining a balanced budget over not just 1 year, but they do a 6 year outlook every year. And they're really thinking about that comprehensive strategy for the whole city there. Okay, so how it's like I'm all of a sudden thinking of that Schoolhouse Rock, How Does a Bill Become a Bill song. I wish I had a fun jingle for How Does a Budget Become a Budget. Uh, I'm not that clever, but there is a process. And here is a graphic showing that multi-step process throughout the year. And it really does take a year. The budget is passed by December 31st each year, and then we start the process again early the following year. January, things are a little quieter, but we're about to step into this time when the city is doing their public engagement and starting to talk about what are the budget priorities for the year and giving the community an opportunity to share your ideas for what they need to focus on in the next budget. After that engagement, various departmental directors across the city submit their requests. City council people submit requests. We're going to talk about that more in a moment. OMB takes those, they analyze all those proposals, they do the number crunching, they feed that to the mayor, and the mayor then in September, by the end of September, submits a preliminary budget to council. There's typically a little bit more community engagement, some opportunity for back and forth. Some years we get more than others. Um, and then by mid-November, the mayor is going to present formally a final. It's still a draft budget, really, because then city council does some horse trading. They pick it apart. They put it back together again because it's up to council to finally approve the budget. If you were paying attention in this last budget season, things got a little bit dramatic. The mayor didn't actually ultimately sign the budget because he didn't like some of what council had come up with, but he also, there was a veto-proof majority, so you can look into it. It was dramatic. We hope it doesn't get that spicy again this upcoming year, but it can be a journey. Let's take a look. You've heard me talk about this. I'm going to drop a link in the chat so you can actually see what I'm looking at. I'm going to change my screen here. Can we get a thumbs up if you can see this yellow capital budget image? Okay, great. Uh, I just want to highlight a little bit of what we mean, so you can get a sense of what the capital budget actually is. There's of course the cover, and you'll notice that it has Mayor Gainey's name on it. We have a new mayor, but we're working off of the budget that was approved under Mayor Gainey. So Mayor O'Connor's first budget will actually be 2027's budget. Although, some changes are underway and happening, council can make some tweaks as they go. There's a lot here. There's an executive summary, but I want to first look quickly at page 11. This is worth highlighting because it shows what are the overall categories that the city heard proposals from constituents throughout the year, throughout their community engagement. And there's one line that we are very proud of at Bike Pittsburgh and here in the city of Pittsburgh, which is the top line, which shows that Complete Streets projects received 221 requests through their public engagement. The next highest is step repair and replacement at 15. So we're looking at order of magnitude higher engagement, which really shows how dedicated and how much people care about making sure that complete streets are focused on. And again, if complete streets is a new term to you, it basically means a street that works for everyone, not just drivers. So many of our streets are designed by default to get cars, as many as possible, through as quickly as possible. Complete streets are talking about, hey, let's make sure that we're designing for pedestrians, for cyclists, for people in wheelchairs, for public transit, so we can all have a complete for everyone street. So I think this is really cool. We want to keep this number up. That's why your engagement is so important. The next thing when you're looking at a budget is you want to skim down here. Page 21 is the project summary. This is kind of like a table of contents for what you're going to see in the budget. Each one of these lines has a dedicated page with further description. There's a lot here. You'll notice a lot of bridges because we need a lot of work on our bridges. You'll notice street resurfacing, that's paving, is in here. Step repair and replacement gets its own line item. What we typically care the most about is that complete streets category. So I'm going to go down here. We're going to zip on down to page 43. Oop, I went too far. Too far. Here we go. Here we go. And on that page, you can see actually a table looking at the next 6 years of where the city expects or is thinking they're going to put monies. PAYGO is that tax dollars, essentially general funds, more or less. We also get monies from the state, from bonds, from other grants. So that is what gets us our ultimate total. You can take a closer look at this, but we care about this, and I wanted to highlight it because you'll notice there is on the second page of this info sheet, it breaks out a couple of little details, but really just neighborhood traffic calming, which is another bucket in and of itself. There are a lot of projects that happen within neighborhood traffic calming. Last year, we got a big grant to do some expansion for Pogo. That's a whole other conversation we can have some other time, but that needed to be articulated in the budget since it was a big chunk of money. But a lot of the specific projects, like the ones that we just talked through, like Trail to Maredale and Allegheny Commons, they used to have their own line items in the budget. When those projects happened, a lot of them did. Now we kind of tend to see them all lumped under one big category. So when you're requesting a project, you might not ultimately see your specific bike lane or steps or what have you in articulated in the budget, but your requests helps the city and helps OMB say, oh, we need to put more money in complete streets. So DOMI then has those dollars to put towards the project that you requested. And you can see exactly how they're thinking about that on the at the end of this, which we have a big, crazy, complicated scrolling table. I'm not going to zoom in. There's a lot here. But basically, they actually lay out every single major request that they got for the budget and they give it some description and they tell you how did OMB go about scoring it versus various criteria. The ones highlighted in green are a minority. You can see all of these projects that were submitted and only a few of them actually made it into the budget. But every year you can look at this and see, okay, where did your specific request fall compared to the others? So that's very much worth taking a look at in more detail at that link that I shared. So that's the capital budget. Um, any burning questions so far before I go on? I know I've been talking a lot. Making sense so far? Okay, great. So now we get into the juicy bit about like, okay, so Seth, what? So there's the capital budget, but like, what's my part in all of this? Um, we have this image here on the right. It's a whiteboard. It says, "We want to hear from you," underlined. This public participation part of this process is so important. I feel like we're pretty lucky here in Pittsburgh to have more of a participatory budgeting process than I think a lot of cities do. Every mayor does it differently. It'll still remains to be seen how Mayor O'Connor is going to orient to public engagement. But the last several mayors have done public meetings, they've opened up surveys, they've really given people a chance to share what do you think needs to be in our budget. And we should have a say in how our tax dollars are spent, right? It's our money. We do expect this public engagement to continue with Mayor O'Connor, and hopefully your council person wants to listen as well. Again, historically, most of them have to some extent. So then your input really then helps to shape what that budget looks like. There are several opportunities for that input. We think the most important is to talk straight to your council person because at the end of the day, they're going to be part of deciding on the final budget, what is actually approved, right? So we highly encourage you with your neighbors. If you're part of a bike ped committee already, you can work with them. If you're not, maybe you can start one. Send a letter to your council person. Schedule a meeting with them to talk about what your concerns are, what your ideas are, what you want to prioritize. I often encourage people to go for a walk in your neighborhood, invite your council person, show them your ideas and your concerns. Maybe find them at events and have a chat with them if you can about what you want to see. This picture on the left is a walk audit with Councilwoman Deb Gross, and the person in yellow is Sean Stevens from Domi, who's actually going to be joining us in March for an event to talk about what they're up to. And it's constituents talking to them about they're actually talking about what they want to see in a capital budget. And here in Polish Hill, the things that were talked about with Councilwoman Gross on this day in the sunshine, a couple of them have actually been funded and have moved forward in terms of traffic calming and safe streets improvements in Polish Hill. So, council person, council person, council person, talk to them. They're not the boogeyman. They're there to help you. They're there to serve you. Second is not nearly as active and involved. It's a pretty easy thing to do. We hope you'll do it. Is the city usually puts together surveys on the city's Engage page. So look out for those. We'll be sharing them. And then public meetings. There are typically a handful scheduled throughout the city. So hopefully there's one close to you. They at least do one typically digitally so that you can participate online if that's easier for you. We tend to see those happen throughout May. Again, keep an eye on Bike Pittsburgh's website, on our Outspoken newsletter. We will be letting you know when these public meetings happen, and we highly encourage you to attend. Again, we don't know for sure what they're going to look like or if they'll happen, but we're pretty confident that they will under Mayor O'Connor. So really, it's our role as advocates to be squeaky, be the squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel gets the bike grease. Call that attention to the issues that need to be addressed through that investment. And whether or not you have a specific issue, everyone should participate in this process because that helps to grow the pie for bike ped infrastructure. And if you are asking for something specific, I'll tell you what, and Thomas will share this in a few minutes. It takes multiple requests, sometimes many years to get what you want. It keeps kind of going back over and over again. But even if your project isn't picked, making requests will add to the pressure that our elected officials feel to at least maintain, if not expand, the overall amount of funding for safe streets. And that is so important in this time, as we all know, where budgets are getting constrained, the belts are getting tightened, and so we really almost need to defend the resources available to make sure that our streets are working the way that we need them to for everybody, regardless of their ability or mobility preference. And I'll say this again, this is part of a broader strategy. Be strategic. This is just one of many tactics. You're going to need to do more than this to be successful. That's why I'm here to help you think about that strategy and coach you through it. You've heard me talk about the capital budget letter. This is a really important part of the process. We hope to see a letter sent by every single bike ped committee or neighborhood advocacy group that cares about biking and walking. So if you're part of one, help lead this process. If you're part of a community association, encourage them to do this. But this looks like a formal letter asking for the investments that you think are needed in your community. It's addressed to your council person who will then take your ideas. They have a process for then submitting proposals to OMB in city government, and you want to use the mayor's typically has some stated priorities that they will announce. We expect to probably see that kind of soon, maybe in April. Use that as a template. So as you're writing your letter, it's helpful to reference the various various priorities that the mayor sets out. We don't know what these are yet. We'll let you know as soon as we get them. And then you want to copy certain people on your letter because, again, yes, of course, we want this to go to your council person. We want them to be asking for these things, but we also want DOMI, maybe even DPW if you need to, maybe your neighborhood planner to have these in mind because they're going to be shaping their budgets and their requests. And so if they see that a neighborhood group is pushing for something that maybe they've already been considering, it will help give them the support that they need. And they may or may not hear that from council if you just send it to your council person. So make sure you copy Domi, copy us as well. That way we can help add some clout. If they see our name on it, they know that we're kind of in this together. And it helps us to kind of keep track of the letters that are being sent in. Any other partners that you might be working with as well? Any questions about that capital budget request letter and what goes into that? We have a whole guide on our website, by the way. I'll show that to you later. We have templates. We keep an archive of every capital budget request letter that we have ever been copied on in a Google Drive. So you have an abundance of examples. You do not have to start from a blank page for writing these letters. But any questions before I go on? Great.
There are
Well,
a bunch of questions in the chat, including from me. I don't know.
great. Let me skim. Eric, are there any
I can attend to some of those. Let's see.
yeah, that'd be great.
Let's see. So some questions that are coming up are we see Leaf asked, is it more effective to send physical letters than emails? My council person is notoriously unresponsive to emails. Yeah, that's a good question, and it really depends on the council person. There's no harm in sending both, we'll say. So a lot of times there are council people who are responsive to emails, so just send them an email and they'll say, received. But so it's really hard to answer that exactly. Sometimes it might need a little bit of extra push. You email them, you follow up, and then see if you can get them to respond in any way, and if not, then send a letter. So every council person is a little different. Are there a list of current council members who have already done a walk audit? I'm not sure about that. There are some that I know have done them. I can't say we have a list. Um,
You know, I could probably tell you off the top of my head, the only one that I know of that hasn't done some form of walk audit that I'm aware of, and doesn't mean he hasn't, is Coghill. I think I've heard at least at some point of everyone, whether it's through Domi doing some kind of project and they're doing a walkthrough or they're working with a bike ped committee. I think pretty much everybody that I'm aware of. I know I went on one with, I think Chuck was there, perhaps with someone from Councilman Lavelle's office. Lavelle himself didn't come, but his chief of staff
Yeah.
joined, right? And that's often what happens on those as well. You might not get the
yeah.
council person, but
And that it's back to Leaf's question really quick. Yes, emailing your if your council person is notoriously unresponsive, be sure to also email their chief of staff. Sometimes their chiefs of staffs are the ones who actually get a lot of that kind of work done.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
One more question. Do council meetings have an open mic before meetings? Yes. Every council meeting has a public moment where you can sign up. When you show up, you can sign in and you have 3 minutes. There's also an online, you can also do that online. You just have to sign up ahead of time and they'll send you like a special link to be able to speak. But same deal, you'll have 3 minutes.
yeah. And me too, Stu. I hope that the Safe Sidewalks crew survey results in repairs in the foreseeable future. Um, we could talk more about that later, but I've heard that our data is already shaping projects for this year, and I hope they'll use it as evidence for next year. And that's actually we'll talk about data later, but remind me to share how we can use the Safe Sidewalks crew data to help you make the case when we get there. So let me come back to that. What you see on your screen now is an advocacy timeline. You've heard me already say how this capital budget process can give you a little bit of a roadmap because it really spans the entire year. It gives you an opportunity to think about how do you slot your activities of your grassroots organizing in. So now, in January and February, is the time to be identifying projects. As the weather's warming up, as the snow's melting, go for a walk, go for a bike, walk around with a map or at least a clipboard and take note of opportunities, issues, ways things could be better that you can then bring to your neighbors, bring back to your group and say, hey, maybe we could work on this. In March, start to crystallize those ideas, gather some data, some stories about what these issues and opportunities are. You're going to want those to make the case. Uh, Capital budget request letters that are the most compelling, and especially walk audits and meetings with council members that work the best are when, yes, you can share some hard data, but also some things from the heart about how everyday people are impacted or their lives could be made better with some changes, right? Um, in April, then, that's a great time if you haven't yet to set up a meeting with your council person, even before you send your letter, to discuss your ideas. They might give you some feedback and say, like, yeah, that one's a great idea. That one, maybe not so much so. You can talk to them before you submit your letter about this. At the end of the day, the letter is often something for them to hold and say, look, my constituents are asking for this. The letter does not have to be the very first time that you are bringing these issues to them. So set up this meeting. You can also find out how they like to receive budget requests. Sometimes I've heard that council people would rather you like fill out a form or instead of writing a formal letter, answer some specific questions to help them shape their proposals. So it can help to have a chat with them about what it is that is going to work best for them. Um, it's worth noting that around this time, construction season will start in April, early May. So we're going to start to see projects built that were funded and planned over the past months and years. You're also going to want to pay attention to the paving schedule. You might even be able to advocate for some last minute projects. We have a whole guide on that I'll share later, but there's the paving schedule that you can pay attention to. Of course, over the warm months, you're going to want to use that time to engage people, get out there, do a variety of tactics to build support for the change that you want. And by the end of May, really, ideally early May, send your letter, but certainly by the end of May, council people typically have to have their proposals into OMB by June 15th. And so you want to give them some time to digest what you've sent, think about it, get it together into a proposal. If you're sending them a letter on June 14th, it's probably not going to make it to OMB in time. They'll probably keep it on a shelf till next year. So get your letter in May. Then around that time also, we start to see public meetings. Um, so keep an eye out for those. Keep up that drumbeat. And then in fall, we'll see that draft budget in September and October. You'll want to get involved again to give feedback. Um, you'll see that draft budget. Maybe your project doesn't make the cut. You'll be able to see that table and what made it into the green zone. If your project isn't in the green zone, that doesn't mean game over. That means game on. Go talk to your council person. Ask, why didn't this get funded? What's going on? Can you advocate for it? Can you help push for it? At that point, you're also starting to learn what tweaks and changes and what else do you need to do to prepare for next year, right? So that's a really critical part of this process. And yeah, continuing to lobby for your project until that budget is approved. It's not over until it's over. Usually mid-December is when they're voting. They have to have it done by December 31st. So that's a timeline, and you can use that to kind of slot in everything from walks to tabling to attending community events to going to community meetings, what have you, to further and make the case for your projects. In a moment, we're going to hear from our friend Thomas Wagner in Southside Smart Streets about how they have won a handful of bike ped improvements by leveraging this process. But before we do that, again, I want to open it up for any burning questions from folks before we turn it over to Thomas. Awesome. Well, Thomas, we'd love to hear from you. I'm going to spotlight you here so we can, if that's okay. And yeah, please tell us a little bit about what how you use this process with Southside Smart Streets.
Sure. I've been involved with Southside Smart Streets for about 10 years. Kind of the organization developed with one specific intersection in mind, and like many organizations, someone wanted to get something done specifically and started an organization, and it sort of evolved from there. Our original original founder has since moved on to greater things and has left the area, but she really got the organization up and running. I think many organizations struggle with the sophomore slump. We've been fortunate in that regard. We got a couple people who were active and really, when she said she was leaving and would be moving out of the area, we were able to find a couple new people to take over, and that was really good. People are busy, they have their own lives, things happen, people come and go, so you sort of have to always be recruiting and looking at organizational momentum. You don't want to be too reliant on one person or the few people that regularly show up. So, I guess capital budget wise, I mean, Southside, I would go out on a limb and say has an embarrassment of riches. We've done very well. I appreciate that from the city. The Neighbor Way, the very first Neighbor Way was put in Southside. That was probably 2018, 19-ish. We've got a couple projects in the pipeline, one that's partially done. I think one of Seth's earlier slides was South 18th Street, which is kind of a key connector between the South Side Flats and all the neighborhoods south of here, Allentown, Belts Hoover, Washington, kind of all the neighborhoods up the hill really are connected by way of South 18th Street. We've been advocating for a long time to get a safe connection up that hill. Pittsburgh geography is not always conducive to that. I mean, hills are hills. We're not dynamiting an entire neighborhood, but trying to at least make a safe way for bikes and pedestrians to get up that hill to the top where a bunch of other neighborhoods live. That's kind of an important thing. So that one is partially done. It was supposed to be done last year. They ran into some utility work that needed to be done. So they got partway through it. If anybody drives around through Southside, you'll notice it's done about 2/3, I think, of the way. And then they're going to finish that up in the upcoming season, I guess, as soon as the weather turns and they can start with weather cooperation, they're going to resume that. So I guess, Seth, does that give you kind of a good background on where I was at?
Yeah, that's great. And something that I'd love to hear you speak a little bit to is, you send your letter every year, but you've also cultivated, I think, a really great relationship with your council member. And, your council member has changed over time, since you've started submitting capital budget requests. Yeah, how has this process, engaging with this process, actually helped to improve and strengthen your relationship with your council member?
We had I guess kind of some general background, and I think Steph covered parts of this, but no for now doesn't mean no forever. And we got approval for the South 18th Street project, and then it got lobbied against really hard by two specific individuals, and they got it killed for probably 6 or 7 years. So this is version 2 that came out now. So I guess it's never a fun thing to say, but no for now doesn't mean no forever, and you have to sort of keep advocating. And even if you get an answer you're not happy with, sometimes you can at least steer the discussion in a way that's helpful. Kind of a couple other thoughts that we've had, as Seth mentioned, our previous city council person retired, and then his chief of staff became the city council person. So it was, I guess, relatively smooth transition that kind of the office person for the previous city council person became the new one. So at least we already knew who the person was, and we had a good relationship there. His office staff has been great. Our current council person is Bob Charland. They're fantastic. I think they're really good to work with. I know, I guess, you have nine individuals in any group. You're always going to have some that are better than others, and some that work well with you, and others that don't. And I guess that's just the nature of any sort of organization. But kind of some thoughts that we had, and the approach we've taken is, if there are organizations in your neighborhood that you can reach out to that can help. A lot of the neighborhoods have chambers of commerce, or if there's a neighborhood committee, like a neighborhood activist group of some sort that's somehow even tangentially related to bike and pedestrian type activities. I mean, the the chambers of commerce are really good. I think they have the ear of the council people and the mayor. They're the ones generating the revenue, or at least a lot of it. And I think if it's an issue that the businesses are really hyped up on, that will definitely help get you to the head of the line. One of the reasons that I think the Neighbor Way got funded ultimately was the South Side has a bike trail and it's great, but it doesn't really connect you to the business district. There's no easy way to get back and forth between the trail and the neighborhood businesses. So if you're going down to use the trail for recreation, that's fine. But if you wanted to go, say, go to a restaurant or one of the stores or a doctor's office or something, there was not a great way to do that. And I think that was one of the reasons why the Neighbor Way idea sort of took off. And that idea is really kind of trying to create an alternative that's a little safer and a little less traffic than it is on the main street, but have at least a way to get in and out of the kind of the amenity parts of the neighborhood. So if you can reach out to the neighborhood organizations, I guess everyone sort of, who the movers and shakers are in your neighborhood, kind of try to reach out to those people. If you have connections there, that always helps. I don't think typically that a chamber of commerce or something like that would be submitting capital budget items, but at least in the informal lobbying effort that goes on, if one of the owners of the restaurant or something like that takes your case, that's certainly a good thing for you. Bark up the right tree. I know we've got, it's a big city. We have a lot of organizations. There's the city, there's PennDOT, there's Allegheny County, I still will call them the Port Authority until I die, but Pittsburgh Regional Transit. It doesn't do you or anyone else any good to be lobbying an organization that doesn't have the power to give you what you were asking for anyway. So I think one of the things that we've really tried to stress is make sure whoever the right organization is, that you're targeting the right people. The saying about never take a no from someone who can't give you a yes. I think that's very true. PennDOT controls a lot of the main roads, and that's, there's some overlap with the city, but in terms of trying to get anything done on a lot of the main roads, including Carson and Penn and some of the other larger streets, as well as anything involving the highways, that's all PennDOT. So we sort of, have to bear in mind that the city isn't the answer to every question, but at least a lot of the questions. So trying to make sure that we get that, at least that you're asking the right people for the right questions or the right options.
Yeah.
Councilperson Charland, we actually met with one of the staff members last night, coincidentally. And interestingly, she said she was not sure what the scoring system was going to look like. I guess we're still pretty early on in the process, but in the previous mayor's administration, there was, I don't remember, maybe 7 criteria, and each item gave you a certain number of points, and that was how they kind of tried to rank what projects should be funded and what projects may not be funded this year. So she said they haven't really had any meaningful discussion on that yet. That's sort of probably tied up with the mayor's priorities and how, what the next stage of the budget is going to be at a high level from a new mayor who hasn't done this before.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of the one nice thing about it is that the mayor chief of staff was the chief of staff for a previous mayor. So while the mayor is a new individual, his chief of staff, who kind of does a lot of the nuts and bolts, is not new to the area and has been involved before and has some history there, and I think has been generally good to work with. And obviously, you're never going to get everything you want, but at least has been supportive in general. A couple other things that we talked through, and this one is kind of new to me. I was surprised. Councilperson Charland's office person, when we met yesterday, said they sort of take the approach that leave the traffic engineering to the traffic engineers. That was different than what we've been told in the past. So let's say, I don't know, you have a street where people park right up to the curb, and it's difficult to see to cross or to get pulling out in a car or drive, as a pedestrian walking. She kind of gave us the idea that they don't really want a detailed prescription of what the issue or what the fix should be. They kind of are more interested in hearing what is the behavior you would like changed. So I guess in my example, that would be the what can we do to reduce the amount of illegal parking within, I think it's 50 feet or whatever it is of an intersection. So I found that to be an interesting comment that was significantly different than what we were told in the past,
Mm,
which was more like, bring me solutions, not problems. You know what I
mm.
mean? So I found that to be an interesting one. I don't know, Eric or Seth, if you have any thoughts on that. That one was new to me.
Well, thank you, Thomas, for input. We'll touch on that last bit briefly. But does anybody else have questions for Thomas, who has been through this process several times now? So you can raise your hand or just come off mute and chat with us.
One other thing that I guess is worth noting, and this one we've discussed in previous meetings, the the general feeling on public input regarding bike infrastructure is not good. And people get really angry about it really fast. And I think you can read any news story or anything on any bike related infrastructure, and people get really angry about it. However, traffic calming is really popular and people support it. So I guess in terms of, well, we can't change the world. How do we play within the rules that are set? The idea, if you can kind of structure the request in a way that it would be more open to traffic calming as opposed to, say, bike infrastructure, you might get further.
That's really good strategic thinking, Thomas. And yeah, you got to know what is the language that your target's going to hear, but also what is going to land well with their constituents to make it easier for them to pitch it. So I'll talk about this in a moment, but be strategic about how you frame this. I mean, two things that I'll draw out from what Thomas just said. One, we encourage you to don't be super specific about saying, I want a speed bump or speed hump or speed table in this one specific location, because the answer might just be no, we can't do that. But if you say, we need traffic calming broadly, or we need a complete street on this street, then leave it to the traffic engineers to come up with the details there. And you know, it can be easier to say, let's do traffic calming that might happen to include a bike lane to narrow the roadway, than just go for the bike lane, right? If you can say, hey, this is, and I think that's actually what got South 18th Street, Thomas, was they needed to narrow the lanes on South 18th Street to slow down drivers, and a bike lane did that beautifully.
And one of the complaints about people who live on 18th Street was that my car keeps getting hit. Well, this is one of those instances where you're being smacked in the forehead with the point, you're still not getting it.
That's right.
So in
That's
some
right.
cases, yes, the idea that your car is getting damaged because other people are driving recklessly fast, yeah, you could kind of see where A and B connect right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Thomas. I'm gonna take you
Sure.
off spotlight here again.
One other thing that I guess has come up and sort of in line with what I had said earlier, the what we were told before was, even if your project is funded, keep lobbying for it. That is not a done deal until shovel hits dirt. And
100%.
things happen. There are always emergencies. The Fern Hollow Bridge collapsed, and suddenly, like, we had a huge expense no one anticipated, and how are we going to pay for that? And
Yep.
there's always the opportunity that, well, what's the easiest project to cancel? One that hasn't been started yet. So if the project has been approved, keep asking, keep reminding. Don't assume that that's a yes until it's actually meaningfully underway. That was another thing that I think, even like I said, we got approved on a project, and then the neighbors that lived on the street and opposed it went to war with us, and
Yeah.
they got it killed for a number of years. So just another, like, keep at it. Don't assume a yes is ever a yes either.
Good recommendation. Questions, folks? And anything you'd like to, again, ask Thomas or me at this stage? Let me ask you a question. What are you getting out of this so far? I'd love to hear from just a couple of people. Like what's kind of clicking for you? What are you starting to see about this process for yourself and maybe how you fit in?
Do you want us unmuted?
Please, yeah, go for it, Aaron.
Okay. I think it's great to hear Thomas's story, and it's something I kind of can relate to, having tried to find a path of communication to somebody in a decision-making capacity. And it was actually Dan Gilman that helped identify the decision makers, maybe 10 years ago, to, get mountain biking, legalized in a municipal code. And it took 6 years of trying to find somebody before Dan said, oh, it's so and so, and come to city council and talk to everybody about, why it's important. And I would say it was probably a very similar route to what Thomas was talking about. But I spent a lot of time trying to find like expense shortcuts, like say, this is how you'll save this money. This is where this costs this, and try to like make it really like easy for them to say yes. And I don't know if that helped or if that was a huge waste of my time, but I was convinced. So I felt like maybe that was convincing for them. But yeah, city council is definitely the way to go to find the people.
Yep. No, I mean, I think that's an awesome strategy, Aaron. Like, make it make sense for them. Make it seem like a
Mhm.
no-brainer. It's like, why wouldn't you do this? Like, you're cuckoo to not do it. It's irresponsible to not do it, right? Because it has cost savings, or
Right.
it, brings in more money, maybe, or what have you. Just makes the city a place where people want to live and they want to move here and they want to raise families here, and et cetera, et cetera. So, no, that's a great thought. I see from Stu, yeah, that takeaway. Don't accept a no from someone who cannot give you a yes. That's a good one. Yeah, think strategically, right? And make sure you're barking up the right tree. Let's hear from one other person. What are you taking away from this? Or maybe even something you just want to admire about what Thomas shared. Uh, Emily, Leaf, Marylise, Chuck.
It's a bit inspiring to hear that you actually can meet with your councilman and have these conversations. I think that's been a little bit of a hard point for us recently, especially trying to get Bobby Wilson's attention.
Yeah.
Glad to
Yeah,
hear
it can be
that
challenging to get that
can
attention, and that
can be
maybe
done.
helps to inform some other tactics that you want to take to like start with getting the attention, right? If you know if you need to be able to just get in the room where it happens, then there are some steps you can take to make it so you can't be ignored, right?
Mhm.
Council districts are fairly small. They don't have, I mean, we're I guess what we have about 300,000 people in the city. There are nine council districts, so roughly 30,000 people a district. And so figure, I mean, you don't want to frame it as being a hostile effort, but hey, we're your voters. Like, listen, we're talking here. We want you to pay attention to us. These things matter to people who live in your neighborhood and
That's
vote
right.
for you or not.
That's right. Um, well, please keep thinking about your reflections. I'm going to ask that question again of what are you taking out of this? And if you got any questions, keep them coming. I'm going to go back to the slides here because I want to give you some tips. We gave you the bottom line here, but some things to really think about to help you use this process effectively. So tip one, think big, ask big. I mean, be strategic and reasonable, but you don't get what you don't ask for. So, I mean, even if you think it might take a while, start asking for it. We typically recommend in a letter to have at least one, obviously, but maybe up to three asks, depending on if that's appropriate. So you might want to stretch ask something that is feels kind of audacious, feels like a big push, just like at some point, I'm sure, Thomas, the Neighborway felt like a big ask. And at some point, South 18th Street felt like a big ask. And you just recently got, in the budget, we learned that that connector from the 10th Street Bridge down through the parking lot into the Eliza Furnace Trail has been funded and should be moving forwards. Again, we got to see it through to shovels on the ground, but um, you know, all of these things felt like big asks at some point, but over time you advocated for them and they start to feel like more reasonable, moderate asks. So put in a big ask, put in 1 to 2 like easier gets into your letter. That's what Polish Hill did when I shared earlier. They had some really big asks, but then they had some things like, can you just change the signage. It wasn't even a capital budget level ask, but they put it in there anyway, and it started a conversation with their council person, and it resulted in them just saying that most cars can't make a certain turn, but emergency vehicles could, and they changed the design, and it really reduced cut-throughs in their neighborhood, right? Also, make sure that your ask is relevant to city property. The city can only act on property that is theirs, so they can't spend money on state roads or privately owned land. Unfortunately, a lot of sidewalks are privately owned. So as much as you might want a brand new sidewalk along a big stretch, if it's not owned by the city, they're not going to be able to budget for it in the capital budget, right? They could budget for their critical sidewalk gaps program, which might help residents get resources to fix their own sidewalks. So that's worth saying, hey, make sure you're putting more money into this. But take a look at, there's a great map, Who Owns My Infrastructure? You can Google that, Who Owns My Infrastructure, Allegheny County, and you can actually see, is this street the city? Is it the state? Is it county? So you really want to focus on that city level. Just to level set, sometimes people ask me like, I have no idea, like $50,000, I have no concept of what that actually means. Here are some examples. This stuff is expensive. A crosswalk is maybe over $1,500. A speed hump, $8,000 to $10,000. It's more if it's a big wide speed table. Although you get more bang for your buck if you have a couple, near each other, because they can do it all at once. Curb extension, those like yellow, and you see in the yellow in the picture, but it's extending that curb as a bump out, $20,000 plus per corner. A bike lane, a simple one, $10,000 per mile. That's just striping, no protection, no flex posts. I pulled this data a couple years ago. So inflation, my friends, it is probably even more expensive than this. But just to give you a sense of what we're looking at when we talk about these kind of projects. Along those lines, use data to make your case. There are a bunch of tools available to help you make your case. There's a crash data dashboard and map that DOMI maintains. It can really help to say, hey, we know there are this many crashes, this many fatalities in this area. That really aligns with the Vision Zero initiative at the city to say, we want to be getting to zero traffic fatalities and serious injuries. We know we need to change our infrastructure to get there. So use that to make your case. I actually want to show you really quick on the Bike Pittsburgh website. If you go to bikepgh.org/advocacy or our homepage, you can go down here to advocacy, go to our resources tab, and you can see a bunch of things. One of them is data and maps. If you click in data and maps, you can see all sorts of useful things, including PennDOT crash data. DOMI has a bunch of maps, including crash data, that Who Owns My Infrastructure, Strava. You can take a look at who's biking and walking and running using Strava where, which can help you show how much of a given street is used and that it might need some attention. Where the county is wanting to prioritize investments and infrastructure. There's a lot of good stuff in here. So use this as a resource. I will drop the link to that in the chat for you so you have it, and I'll show it again later. But don't get too hung up on the details, all right? Like don't go into like, yes, data is good. Honestly, sometimes stories are even more powerful. Like data's up here, stories get to the heart, and it's that kind of appeal to emotion that often can actually get a council person to say, oh yeah, we do need to do something about this. So balance those two, okay? And don't get so in the weeds that you're paralyzed. Sometimes we can just be looking for the perfect statistic and the perfect way to make the case, and it keeps us from actually doing the thing and having the conversation. So same thing with cost. Like we don't expect you to be the traffic engineer expert. Make your best guess as you're working on this. Don't get hung up. Is it or is it not above $50,000? Tip 3, tie your request into existing plans if you can. There's been a lot of money spent on thinking about how we should do things. Let's leverage those so it doesn't just sit on a shelf. We have this awesome Bike Plus plan. You can again access that from our data resource portal. That shows the visionary bike network. If there's a bike lane or infrastructure that does not yet exist, but it's on that plan, you have a really good case for asking for it because the city's already said they want to do this, but sometimes they need a nudge. They need to hear from people that this is what we want. It's also a great place to look if you want ideas for what to advocate for or what to ask for. The Pedestrian Safety Action Plan has a similar set of ideas and recommendations that you can say, hey, we already said we wanted this, let's do it. And then neighborhoods. A lot of neighborhoods or even clusters of neighborhoods already have plans. Homewood's an example. West Pittsburgh is working on a mobility plan. East Liberty has a plan for not just East Liberty, but into Shadyside and Friendship a little bit, even into Highland Park. So look for those plans. If you go to the city's Engage page, there's even a tab of like neighborhoods, details and plans and things up at the top, and that's often where you can find these. Um, so reference those and use them again in your advocacy. If you see an idea in there, even if it's not for capital budget, take them to your council person and say, hey, we said we wanted this. What's happening with it? Okay. Tip 4, find your supporters, find your people and your opponents. Identify those partners. Thomas alluded to this earlier. Find the community organizations who are on your side, the businesses, the churches, anyone who has impacted members, employees, clients, what have you, who you can bring onto your side. Some neighborhood groups, when they send their letter, they encourage people to sign on. Shadyside sometimes has a list of like 20 plus signatories on their capital budget request letter. It's kind of like a petition. I think that's great. Other bike ped committees don't want to go through that process and wait, so it's up to you, but it's a good way to show support. Of course, talk to your neighbors, get them to sign on to your letter. Take note of their stories. Did their car get sideswiped, like Thomas said? Are they feeling like it's dangerous to cross the street? Maybe they're not super excited about the thing that you want, but they can see how the thing that they want helps them get a thing that they want or have an experience that they want, right? Stanton Ave, I think, is a good example. A lot of people were advocating for the bike lanes, but neighbors saw how that would also a full complete streets project, because it wasn't just about the bike lanes. It was a full Stanton Ave complete streets project. The neighbors saw how that would help slow down drivers and make their neighborhood safer. Um, so don't do this in an isolated bubble is the point. And likewise, you know, consider your opponents who might be opposed to you. I have cars parked here as a picture because often parking can be a sticking point. It can get really tricky. It can get really tense. It's better to find out what those issues are early and figure out how you might address them instead of being surprised by them later or just kind of like sweeping it under the rug and hoping that it's not a problem. No, look it head on, think about it strategically, and see what you can do to address those issues. And step 5, this kind of encapsulates all of it. Strategy, be strategic. This is one tactic in an overall strategy. There's more that you need to be doing, getting media attention, building your case in other ways, talking to other stakeholders. And when you are focusing on your specific campaign, we talked about this a little bit already, but we generally suggest focus on the problem and its impact. Although now Thomas is saying maybe to talk a little bit about the behavior that you want changed, which I think is interesting, take 2. But regardless, stay somewhat general about the solution. Again, very few of us are engineers. We may think we know what the best solution is. Like, should this be a fully buffered, concrete protected bike lane with all the bells and whistles? That might be what we really want. But it can backfire if we ask for something too specific that isn't doable and it just gets rejected whole cloth because we weren't as tactful as maybe we could have been. Then nothing gets done, right? So, for example, try asking for traffic calming or right sizing or a road diet or a complete streets project that might get you further than asking for a specific speed hump or something else that you don't actually know if it's feasible or not. And then once the money's allocated to address that problem, then as the community engagement process happens, you can start getting into the weeds about the specifics. You can talk to Domi's already got the money, and then you can say, "Hey, I really think a speed bump would make sense here. Does that make sense?" And then you can have some back and forth with them. I will say sometimes it's just obvious what the thing you need is a specific piece of infrastructure. You know what it is, like a protected bike lane. Ask for it. Like, don't not ask for it, but just be strategic. Think about it carefully. Um, and to send you off here, I just want to give you some possibilities for next steps. What I would recommend doing after this call is go back to your neighbors, go back to your neighborhood group, go back to your community. Identify your projects, your partners, your supporters in the next month or two here. Set up a meeting with your council member to start making your case, having a conversation with them. Then make sure you're getting ready to send that letter by the end of May. We are so here to help. I would love to like, no question is too small, or even if it feels silly or what have you, ask it. I'm here to help. Would love to work on drafts with you, whatever you need. Eric and I got your back. And then so get those in by end of May. Send us a draft late April if you can. And then as we start to see public meetings and the surveys online, engage with those. Get your neighbors to engage with those. Get your loved ones to engage with those. Your church constituents, anybody in the city can be part of this. I actually live in Swissvale, but I use the streets in the city all of the time, right? So I fill out these surveys because I also use this infrastructure, and it really matters. So that's for you too, Stu. Even though you live outside the city, right? That input really matters. Um, that's that's the heart of it. I'm going to open it up in a moment for some more questions and some more dialogue, but I'll show you one more slide just to show those are your next steps. We're here to help. On February 26th, we have our next advocacy booster call. So this is when it's kind of like open office hours, coaching time with me. If you have an idea, if you have a challenge, really, whether it's your campaign or forming a group or leading your group, whatever you got, bring it. We'll coach you through it. If we've got other people on the call, we'll draw on their experience. It's always a good time. Then on March 19th, we're going to have our quarterly advocacy network gathering with the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. I love this meeting every year. They tell us about what projects they're looking at for the year, what we can look forward to, what they need input on. So they're going to do that again. PennDOT is also going to join us, or representatives from PennDOT, talking about the Commercial Street Bridge closure and the impacts of that. So if you got questions about the mess that's going to happen in July, please come by in March and ask about that. And then I don't have a sign up for this yet, but April 21st, we are going to have our next training workshop that is focused on power mapping, where we're going to talk about how do you identify your target? Like, who is actually the person who has the power to make the decision that to do the change that you want? There's always one person, and you need to figure it out. And then who are your allies and supporters to help influence that person to make that change? So we're going to do some drawing. We're going to do some research. It's going to be fun. I'm hoping to do it in person, that one. So keep an eye out for that April 21st. And I'm going to put in the chat some links so you can check that out. And I'm going to take my screen share down, and here we are. We got some open time. In a moment, I'm going to ask again, what are you getting out of this? And I also want to hear, what do you plan to do with what you're getting out of this? Like, let's get inspired by each other's actions. Like, what are you going to do next? And is there any support you need? But as you're thinking about that, does anyone have any questions?
Seth, I'd love to see one of the old letters just to see what people
Yeah,
ask for and like what
let's
they
do
look
it.
like and everything.
Let's do it. We'll do it right now.
Oh, okay, cool.
Thanks for asking. So I am going to go to our resources page. I'm going to scroll down. By the way, if you want to think through strategy, our grassroots advocacy toolkit is a really great way to get some support thinking through strategy. But I'm going to go down to this guide, How to Influence the Capital Budget. You can watch our training from last year. This will get updated from the video we're recording tonight. You can see the last version of the capital budget, a lot of background, and really how to work through this. Some links to different plans in here, the scoring matrix that's been used in the past, and we'll update this if we get any changes. You can check out the form that your council person will be filling out to submit to the mayor's office, or at least what Mayor Gainey used. Again, this could change. We will update this guide, but you can take a look at that. And we have a template letter that you can take a look at. So here's an example letter. You can, of course, take the Bike PGH logo off if you want to. You can keep it, I guess. Typical letter format, just introducing yourself, what you're up to. Maybe we often recommend thanking your council person for something if you can, such as we continue to see ever more people out walking and biking in our neighborhoods. We love to see that. Thank you for doing what you do to support that. But here's some problems and opportunities. Here's what our vision is. Boom, boom, boom. Three asks with some details, a little bit of additional context and a sign off. When you actually fill in the details, it's probably not actually going to be that much more than 2 pages. I don't have one off the top of my head that I'm like, oh, this one is absolutely great, but let's open the archive. There's an archive here. Let's look at 20. So each year, it kind of gets confusing. I just opened 2026, but we're in 2026. No, this was for this year's budget. So these were all letters written in 2025 for the 2026 year. We were talking about Southside Smart Streets. Let's just use that as an example. So you can see what Thomas worked on. You have all of these copies here to the former director of DOMI, their city planner, their contact in the councilperson's office, also some partners. So you have Friends of the Riverfront, you have us at Bike Pittsburgh, you have Southside Community Council copying those partners, some introduction, gratitude. We sincerely thank you for your commitment. And then we encourage you to provide dedicated funding and more details. And they go into it. So I love how Southside structures this. They have a headline, they share some detail. They say, why now? Like, bottom line, these are actually referencing safety, quality of life, project readiness. This is actually referencing the scoring criterias: safety, project readiness, quality of life, public support. So you can see how they're really tying it in a clear way. Um, Also mentioning that it ties into plans, so the city's Bike Plus plan. They do this for each one. So they had the climbing lane on South 18th Street, which they won. They have traffic calming on Sarah Street, which they're still working on. They have connecting South 10th Street to the Eliza Furnace Trail, which we gotta wait. We gotta keep pushing to make sure those shovels hit the ground, but we're told it's funded, and they tie it in for every single one. It's just barely over 3 pages. Um, what do you think, Emily? Does that help?
Sorry, as a mute. Yes, yes, that helped a lot. I didn't realize all the archive was online.
Oh yeah, we got a bunch in there.
I should have known.
We're here to help, We got
Yes.
we got I mean, I don't know if you saw the years, but I think we have them going back to 2017 at least. So there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions, Emily?
I think I'm good for right now.
Others? Questions? I'm gonna put a couple people on the spot because I'm so curious. Uh, Mary Lise or maybe Leaf or maybe Chuck. Would love to hear like what are you getting out of this? Like what is in particular a next step that you think you're gonna take?
I can go ahead and say something. So, this is only my second advocacy workshop meeting that I'm coming into, and I have like a very small amount of kind of like bike pedestrian advocacy background. So, I was really looking to get more of an idea of what like concretely it looks like to do the advocacy in practice. Um, so this is so helpful because I think having such a clear timeline and having it broken down into a concrete length of time. So within a year, you can see like all the steps that happen and what I, even like at my very kind of elementary level in this, how I'm able to contribute, I think is very helpful. So one of the things for me that I think kind of gets in the way is I'm going to be moving away sometime in the summer. Um, but I know that I I've taken advantage of all the work that has been done on pedestrian and cycling advocacy in Pittsburgh, and I still want to be able to contribute if I can. And I also want to do that wherever I go next. So I'm taking a lot of lessons from this, and
Good.
even though I won't be here long, I think one of the next steps that I can do is joining my local committee. Like I live in the North Side,
Yeah.
and getting to know what kind of campaigns they're working on right now. Like however I can contribute I think is a good first step for me.
Awesome. Well, you got two buddies here. Chuck and Stu are both members of Walk Ride Northside. Maybe one of them can drop in the chat information for the committee if they have it on hand, so that you can plug in there. And please, I mean, even though you're leaving, fill out that survey. Come to a public meeting if you can, even if it's just to reflect on what you've appreciated about Pittsburgh and what you want to see us do, even when you're gone. I hope you'll get plugged in there. The more voices, the better. I will say, folks, I have been shockingly disappointed at how light the attendance has been at these capital budget meetings. The past 2 years in particular, it's been a little bit disheartening, but then a little bit heartening that the people who do show up tend to be bike ped people. So that's kind of cool. But I think as a community beyond Bike Pittsburgh and bike ped advocacy, we really could be doing better for community engagement on some of this stuff. And that's on the city as well to make it accessible and make sure people know. But get your people out to these, like really motivate folks to go, because it's a muscle, right? If we don't use it, we're going to lose it. And if we don't show up to these community engagements, they're not going to see the value in doing them anymore. And we then lose that opportunity to participate in the democratic process and have a more democratic city. So please show up. How much does it matter whether you show up in person or on Zoom? I do always say in person is better, but if the Zoom one is the one that you can make, it's certainly better than not coming at all. That is tends to be the best attended one in the past couple of years from what I've seen. So, yeah, whatever fits for you is great. Yeah, Leaf, did you have any other questions or any takeaways from this?
Um, I don't have time to join my neighborhood bike pack group. I know it's Better Streets Lawrenceville. I just don't have time because I'm really involved in other local neighborhood nonsense.
That's great.
So I mostly show up at community meetings. I don't know if you had some kind of sheet for like tips for what's the best way to frame stuff at community meetings.
Ooh, what's the best way to frame stuff at community meetings?
Well,
Uh,
because like I have very extreme opinions on cars. I think there should be never be any free parking, etc. But I know I'm not supposed to say that. So it'd be nice to have some parameters around like what I could say that it's not necessarily my true opinion, but would be more like
uh,
constructive.
Honestly, I mean, I will toot our Bike Pittsburgh horn here. Just read our blog. Page through our blog, especially if you go on our advocacy page, you can see blogs that are specific about advocacy topics. We're constantly churning out think pieces, content, ideas, recommendations, and that's worth looking at because I think we figured out how to message things in a way that, yeah, in the back of our heads, we might say like, a thing about cars, but publicly we've learned how to say it diplomatically so that people can hear it and act on it accordingly and actually digest it. So yeah, check out our blog. I think that's a great place to start. Thanks, Leaf. Uh, yeah, anyone else have takeaways or next steps you want to share? Brew house. I mean, maybe there's beer in the equation. Maybe there's art in the equation. I
Hey, sorry, my name's Natalie. I was just writing you a message, but I just wanted to say thank you for doing this. I've been listening in, sorry, honestly, multitasking, but everything I heard was great. And I am a little bit of a biker myself. I came, but I also was really interested in how like your process on advocacy can apply to other areas, apply to arts advocacies. And I think that using this presentation like you have, like has also given me ideas around that. So it's really helpful just to see like the process laid out and has been great to listen in. Thank you.
Awesome. That's so good to hear. Well, thanks for being part of it. Happy to chat later too. I think Eric and I are pretty proud of this weird model we've created for civic engagement and supporting civic engagement. And we do get that feedback like, hey, I can actually take what I've learned here and apply it to all sorts of other things. So yeah, happy to
Yeah,
talk shop.
definitely. It's been a
Yeah.
well-run session, and I've been to some other things that I wish like went through this nitty-gritty a little bit clearer. And so I definitely would be happy to follow up and talk
Awesome.
more.
Yeah, give me a shout. Eric, do you have anything that you want to add or just closing thoughts as we wrap up here to send folks away with?
Nothing that we didn't really cover. But I will put an exclamation point on something Seth said earlier. This is something we've been active in a long time, is trying to influence the capital budget. And it has been very helpful. And like, while we don't always get what we want, I think this work does help make the pie bigger for everybody. And so, but the thing that I was putting an exclamation point on what Seth said was that there are a lot of people don't take advantage of this. And so the fact that we are doing this work really does like make us seem popular. I mean, this work is popular, but it kind of highlights how popular this work is in a way. And it shows that we really care, and I think that's really important for the people who are making these decisions, just like back to the beginning, full circle back to the beginning. Complete Streets was the number one by far biggest thing, and that just helps everybody. So, we've been at this a long time, and I think it's been helpful and effective. So glad everybody is getting something out of it.
Thanks, Eric. Claire, I saw you come on video. Did you have anything you wanted to add or ask?
I just thought this was super helpful, and something that I took away is I'm actually working on the West Pittsburgh Mobility Report.
That's right.
Um, and something that's super significant to me that I didn't realize until I got into design and planning is how much those community engagement meetings actually influence the outcome of those plans. Like I know the community engagement meeting we had, like even people putting a dot on a map was calculated and part of the the choosing process for which projects were priorities. So I kind of wanted to reiterate that and also learn like what I should be looking out for kind of on the other side when I'm running those community meetings as well. So I wanted to say thank you, Seth, for running this.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of this. I'm glad to have you on both sides. You know. And Aaron, I did just see your question. If we are telling interested community members about the capital funding meetings, should we direct them to Bike PGH resources page? Sure. The Engage page, though, is probably the best place to look for that. Engage.pittsburghpa.gov, I think. There isn't a page set up for it yet, but it'll pop up when it's ready. But then we'll have a blog post about it. We always have a blog post every year, kind of highlighting the meetings, where they are, why you should go. So again, keep an eye on our newsletter, keep an eye on our blog, and you'll get the details there. Yeah. Yeah.
Seth, I had one parting question.
Sure.
One of the questions that we had from our meeting last night, we were interested in advocating for some upgrades to the chute, which is the connector there between the Eliza Furnace Trail and the trail that runs through Junction Hollow.
Yep.
I don't know precisely where the city council border is, but I think that is technically just outside Bob Charlin's district.
It is.
However, a lot of Southsiders use that route, and
Yes.
since it's sort of in like an unpopulated non-residential district of the city, it's kind of often La La Land. And are there any thoughts for how we could advocate that? Yes, it's not technically in your district, but it is in the city, and a lot of your constituents have to or want to travel that way and would like a safer way to do it. How do you frame that?
Contact Councilwoman Warwick. She's aware, she cares. I think she'll be grateful to hear from more constituents. She knows how much it impacts Siders as well. Ultimately, it'll be up to her to help move that forward. But there's no issue, contacting another council person.
And I'll add,
Okay.
there's also, there's a bike ped committee and people in Greenfield who also have similar things. So we can also put people in touch with folks in other neighborhoods who might have a similar goal, and it just only adds weight and weight to that request.
That's right.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Thomas, for being an example tonight and letting us highlight you. And kudos for all your great work. It's so greatly appreciated. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to get into civics with us and get a little nerdy. And please keep in touch. I put several links in the chat for upcoming resources and events and things. So we'll see you out there. We'll see you in the streets.
Thanks, Seth.
Bye.
See ya.